Hello, everyone. I'm going to go over the June 2018. I know we did this in class, but just so that you could replay the parts, like if you were still confused about. And so I have the calculator open, but again, the actual physical calculator is going to help you. If you haven't invested in one, please do so. On the day of the Regents, I'm not sure if they will provide a calculator, and then you don't know if there's like other issues that goes wrong with the calculators because a lot of the people have been using those calculators. So it's best practice to just get your own. And it's the TI-84CE, the newer version, the thinner one that requires you to charge it. It's also good to charge your devices, your calculator beforehand, and to bring a number 2 pencils, black and blue pen. Okay, so a lot of the solutions that I have here are color coded just so that you understand what's happening. But of course, all of this can be done in pencil. All right, so let's take a look at the first one. So the first one, they want you to understand like, what is the solution? So like the goal is to, of course, solve for it algebraically. And to do that, you have to set y equals to y by using a back-to-back substitution. So once you do that, you're going to get a quadratic, and they want to test that you know how to solve quadratics. So x equals -2 and x equals -1 when you factor this. And then, of course, they also want you to solve it back into the equation to solve for your y values. Another way you could do this is just by putting it into y1 and y2 on your calculator and type in the 4 values that they give you, -4, -1, 1, and -2, and see which one works. And obviously choice 2 works, okay? All right, for number 2, which statement is always true about the graph f of x equals 1/8 to the x power? The graph is always decreasing. I'm going to pull this out for a second so you can see it in full screen. You can see from the graph that the function is always decreasing as x is getting bigger from a table because the y values are decreasing. And then you can also see it from the graph. Like just draw like a sketch of it on your paper and then show that it's decreasing. Okay. For number 3, what the goal is to do it algebraically, but of course you could always use your calculator. The technique here would be to factor everything so that the numerator, I mean, if you want to go into detail about like how to factor the numerator and denominators separately, like here's how you do it. And the key skill here is factor by grouping. So if you're struggling with this, you need to go practice factor by grouping in the Delta math. Okay, when you factor them, everything cancels out except for x plus 3 and x. Now, if you want to check this on your calculator, you can. You just put choice 1, y1 equals 3, y2 equals -17/2, y3 equals x plus 3 all over 8, y4 is x squared minus 9 all over x times x minus 3. And y5 will be the original expression that's given. And then you see which one matches with y5. And notice in y5, choice 3 and 4 are going to work. Well, you just have to remember that we have to, reduce it in simplest form. And 4 is not in simplest form. So therefore, y is the answer. y3, choice 3. Okay. Okay. 4, they wanted you to do some sort of what's that called? Best fit line. And so you just do your best to like draw a curve within the lines. And you notice that it's an exponential. And if it's an exponential function and there's a shift of 2 units up, there definitely has to be a +2. So as a result, it's choice 2. Like that's how I did it. You could also do it on your calculator. So on my calculator, I put all the equations on 1, 2, 3, and 4 onto y1, y2, y3, and y4. And then I'm going to pick a point. So like my purple line hits this point 9, 22.5. And I'm going to look at which one gave me the best value that hits that amount. And it happens to be choice 2 because it's 22.6. So that was the closest. So therefore I chose 9. I highlighted Y3 because I don't know if you can see this, but on my graphing calculator is a black color. I'm not sure why. So you can't really see the number unless you highlight it in pink. So, okay. The other one is imaginary units. Imaginary units are not scary. Just keep in mind that I is a square root of -1. So when you expand it out, what are the two skills that you need? Binomial squares. You need to know that when you have a plus b squared, that's the first term squared plus 2 times the first term times the second term plus second term squared. So therefore, when you simplify out x plus 3i all squared, that's going to simplify to x squared plus 6xi minus 9. A lot of students forget the middle term. So don't forget, like a binomial square is a trinomial. Similarly, the second case is the same idea. And so when you expand it out, the only difference is that the middle term is going to be -2ab. So when you expand it out, you get 4x squared minus 12xi minus 9. Now, keep in mind that you're subtracting. So you would then distribute a negative to all of the numbers. And when you combine like terms, you get negative 3x squared plus 18xi. Okay, now, can you do this on a calculator? Yes, you can. The only thing is that you would have to like set x to a number. So for example, you say like 2 store x, but make sure you're in the real world. And then you're going to type in the original, and the calculator is going to give you -12 plus 36i. And then you just type in the choices on your calculator and see which one matches. And the only one that matches is choice 3. Okay. Is the function even? A function is even if it is symmetric to the y-axis. So it has some symmetry, okay? So let's take a look at each choice. Sine of x is an odd function because it has rotational symmetry. It means that if you rotate about the origin 180 degrees, it will look back to itself. And then this one, number 2, x squared minus 4, I hope you can see that that's symmetric to the y-axis. And also the degree is even. It does help. That's why it's called an even function, but even degree, not all even degrees are even functions. So just to note that. For example, like x squared plus 2x plus 3 is not going to be an even function. It doesn't have symmetry there. Now, this one is neither, this absolute value function, because there's no symmetry around the y-axis. And if you rotate 180 degrees, it's not going to work either. And just to note, absolute value function, there's I think 3 ways of getting ABS. You go alpha y equals, and then you do the arrow and number 1. Or you could do second 0 ABS. That's actually my favorite way because it's like so easy. It's the first function in your catalog. And then the other one is you could go to math, num, and then ABS. And then finally, this quartic function is also not an even or an odd, because it's not even because it doesn't have symmetry around the y-axis, and it's not odd because you can't rotate it. So, okay. So number 7. Number 7, the function n of t equals 100. You have this equation and they want to know what's the decay that's the fastest. So what do you have to do? I hope you see what you have to do. You have to do like n of 10 minus n of 1 all over 10 minus 1. And that could be troublesome. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to put it into y1, get those y values, right? For what do I need? I need 1, 10, 20, 15, 25, and 30. So I need all these numbers basically from the choice problems. And then for each one, like the first one says f of 10 minus f of 1 over 10 minus 1. Well, what is f of 10? F of 10 is 79 and f of 1 is 97. So when you compute each one, you're going to do the same thing all on your calculator. Okay. And then you're going to see that the one that has like the highest slope, which is the absolute value of all these rates, is the first one, number 1. Okay, because it's 2. Everything else is like 1.4, 1.6, 1.6. So the answer is 1. Okay. So what do they want you to do in this scenario? They just want to see if you know how to factor and if you know really strong algebra skills here. So in the first scenario, you're just going to FOIL it out, combine like terms until you get x squared plus 6x minus 7, and that actually factors out into x plus 7 and x minus 1. So that's the answer. Number 2, you're also going to distribute and, FOIL it out. And when you do that, you're actually going to get x minus 7 and x plus 1. The last one, if you factor everything and cancel all the like terms, you get x squared minus 8x plus 7. And number 4, you get x squared plus 8x plus 7. Okay. If you want to look at the foiling out a little bit closely, you can, but I'm going to skip over it because it takes too long. And for the most part, you all know how to do this. Other options, if you forget, I did see some of you on your final, you were using your calculator and you had programmed like 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Especially for our multiple choices, they give you the answer. And so what you're doing is Y5 should always be the original. That way it's easier to make a decision because you're comparing Y5 with all the other Y values. And choice 1 is the only one that matches. Okay. All right. What about 9? 9, you could find the LCM. Okay. But I don't want to work too hard. I realize that 2 of the fractions have the same denominator. So I'm going to use a technique of combining like terms, like cleaning up your house, right? So we're going to combine like terms and we're going to add. So we have 2 over x equals 4x over x plus 3. Now we're going to use our LCM. I need an x and I need an x plus 3, right? Once I have the denominator the same, we're going to drop the denominator and get 2x plus 6 equals 4x squared. We're going to subtract 2x and the 6 on one side to set it equal to 0. Use your, X box method to factor. So it's like factor by grouping like 3 times. And finally, you get x equals -1 and x equals 3 over 2. So that's the answer, except I would check them. So here I am putting the left-hand side into y1 and the right-hand side of the equation into y2. Typically, when you do this and you check your answer, it's always from the original problem. Because if you make a mistake in your work, then you've used like the mistake and you just want to make sure that you were on the right track. I plugged in all the ones that were offered here. So they said 3, 1.5, -2, -1. So when I plug it in, the only one that worked out to be the same was 1.5 and -1. And that's the correct answer that I got. Okay. All right. Trig. Trig is not that bad. Okay. You just remember what I said. So they marked this graph and you have to come up with an equation. Fine. The first thing I would do is find the midline. So, okay, the midline is, I believe it's the average of the min. So 4 plus 14, 8. Yeah, it's the average, right? So I'm going to write it down because I also forget these things. So it's like y max plus y, y max plus y min divided by 2. And y max is 14. 14 plus 4 over 2, which gives us 9. So your midline is the average of your maximum values and minimum value of the y value. And your period is equal to 2 pi divided by b. And so the period is your 0 max, 0 min, 0, because that's sine, and that's 12. So if I want to find the b value, b is equal to 2 pi divided by 12, which is pi over 6. And the amplitude, I guess I'll write the amplitude here. I wonder if I can just move this over here as a way to calculate this. And then amplitude, let's see if I remember. I believe it was like y max minus y min, max minus y min divided by 2. So 14 minus 4 divided by 2. And that gives us 10 divided by 2, which is 5. Is that the answer? Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. Honestly, I could never remember the formula. So I like to do mine visually, like graph it or just count the boxes. And then from there, like once I can figure out like what the answer is, I could usually derive the rule. And so, yeah. Let me just write that A is equal to 5. Now it's positive because it's 0 max, 0 min. However, had it gone like 0 min, 0 max, then you know your A is negative. So I'm looking at my equation and everything seems convincing. It's down to like choice 1 and choice 4. But because this is 0 max, 0 min, 0, it's sine. Other techniques. Well, you have 4 choices, right? So you could technically put in your calculator and then look at the points, right? You can get a point of value. For example, I probably would test 0, 0, and 0, 6, 12, and 18 just to see if they equal 9 or something to that effect. And I think I did that over here. So like I checked by putting y1 equals 5 sine pi over 6 x plus 6. Make sure you're in radiant mode. When you're graphing, you're always in radiant mode. Somebody asked me in class, like, will we ever be in degree mode? And I think for the most part, you are in radiant mode. I don't think you need to change to degree mode. So that's a good point. And do remember that they will reset your calculator. So you will be defaulted to radians anyways. 9. Yeah, so these points matched out. And I did 3 because remember, your period is 12, right? So an interval, I don't remember if you remember in class, but an interval is equal to the period divided by 4. So if you have 12 is your complete cycle, right? Then like if 12 is where you made one complete cycle, then the period, the interval will be 3. So every 3 is where you're going to have those 5 critical points listed out. Okay, so that was that. On number 11, on a given school day, the probability that Nick oversleeps is 48%. And he probably has a pop quiz. Okay. Usually when they ask probability questions, either multiplying, it's like independent events, or conditional. Like those are the 2 hot topics. So because they're independent and they have to use this word independent, you now know you can do P of, right? Like the rule is P of A, and B. And the and is like, it looks like this symbol. And B is equal to the P of A times the P of B. Okay. And I'll color code this so that it's easier to know. Okay. It takes a while to color code things. And I'm also going to erase this for a little bit. Okay. So, all right. So you just multiply it and you get 12%. All right, remainders. So there's so many ways to do this. So we could do long division, we could do synthetic division, or the remainder theorem. So let's do the synthetic division. It's a multiple choice. We don't have to do long division. So I'm going to write the coefficients of x cubed, x squared, x to the first, and x to the 0. If there is no number there, you're going to put a placeholder of 0. So it's 1, negative k, 2, and 0. Then you're going to put 1 on the corner. Now, we did say in class about synthetic division with a fraction, and I think that comes up later on in this video. There is something that you have to be aware of, okay? So I would suggest to use synthetic division if you have integer lengths. And if you have fractional ones, you use long division. It's going to help out a lot better. But anyways, you bring down the 1. 1 times 1 is 1. Negative k plus 1 is negative k plus 1. You times it by 1. and then it's negative k plus 1 plus 2, which is negative k plus 3. You times it by 1, and it's negative k plus 3. Now, the two of them have to equal to 0 because it says that it is a factor. So the remainder has to be a 0. So when you solve for k is equal to 3. Okay. So after that, so that's one way. Another way is to use the remainder theorem. Well, what is the remainder theorem? The remainder theorem states that if you substitute in 1 into the function, the output should be 0 because the output is the remainder. So when you substitute in 1, we get 3 minus k equals 0, k equals 3. What else was I going to say? Okay, well, other ways, like let's say you don't know what to do, and well, here's another method. So I have one method, right? And this is synthetic. I'll write like method 2. Method 1, synthetic division. And then method 3, calculator. Hypothetically, you could plug all of these into the calculator, because all you have to do is, I'm going to highlight over here, it's the k value, right? So you put in all these values into the calculator and check it out. So here's a 0, here's 2, here's 3, and here's negative 3. Now be careful, because when you substitute in, double negative is a positive, okay? And then when you go on your calculator, you're looking to input 1, because that's the remainder. So whichever one gave you 1 here, so 0, right, in your chart and your table, that's the answer. So choice 3 was the only one that gave you a 0 value. So therefore, 3 is the answer. Okay. Profit. If you remember in class, it was like it was like at the end of like adding and subtracting polynomials. And one of the questions was profit. And it's because of this question. So you have to know, I don't know if they tell you, they do, but they do tell you that the cost is the difference from the revenue and the profit. So what you had to do is subtract the two. Now, what makes this question difficult or easy to mess up is that a lot of students forget that when you subtract a second polynomial, you have to change all the signs. So the sign becomes 0.5x squared minus 250x and then plus 300. And then you combine your like terms and you should get a choice of 1. In number 14, let's see. Okay, so they give you like the initial population and they tell you like the interest growth. So for j of x, it's going to be 1240 times 1.06 because it's the 6% plus the 100%, which is 1.06. Okay. Same thing with Williamstown. It's 890 times 1.11. And you're both raising it to the x power. So what I did here is we're going to try to solve for x. So we're going to divide both sides by 1240, right? To isolate the base. But then you're also going to divide by 1.11x. So that you now have 1.06 divided by 1.11 to the x equals 89 over 124. Now that you have like the base on one side and it equals to like an answer, you can take the log of both sides. So there's several ways to do this. Either you could do the spiral technique. So I'm just going to go over here, like 106. So I'm going to write or 106 divided by 111, all raised to the x power equals 89 over 124. Base to this is equal to the x. So log base 106 divided by 11 of 89 over 124 is equal to x, okay? But realize that that's really the same thing as a change of base. So when I go my calculator, right? So let's do second quit. Log alpha x 106 divided by 11 right, divided by log alpha x 89 over 124, you get, oh, did I mess up? I might be in, I don't think the mode matters actually. It should be 7. I did mess up, but why did I mess up? Oh, I did mess up. Okay, I was supposed to switch it. It is very early on a Saturday morning. Alpha x, this is 89 divided by 124 divided by log alpha x 106 divided by 111 and then close it. Yeah, so it's 7.19. All right, so that's that. So that's about 7. What you could also do on your calculator is you could solve for the y value by putting into y1 and y2, and then they give you 4 answers, right? 7, 20, 68, and 125, and you see which one is equal, and that's the answer. So it's choice 1. Okay. Choice 3, what's the inverse? An inverse function is where you can reflect it over y equals x. And when you do a reflection over y equals x, you're switching the y and x values and you're solving for it. So I graphed it. Another way you can do this is by graphing it, right? So you put y1, which is x cubed minus 2, and then you put y2 as x, and then y3 could be one of these 4 choices, and you see which one is a reflected image of the blue one. And it happens to be the red one, which is choice 3. But how do you do this by hand without the calculator? Like I said, you switch the x and y and you solve for y. Add 2 over and then take the cube root, which I think might be faster than putting it on the calculator. But hey, you got 3 hours, and if you forget, this is your option. Imaginary number. So they're telling you about a 4th degree polynomial. So if it's a 4th degree polynomial, the end behavior has to go in the same directions, and it has to have 2 intercepts, because -5 and 3 are real numbers, and I and -I are imaginary numbers. So if I look at my choices, I'm already eliminating choice 1 because it has 4 intercepts, and choice 4. And of course, it could be 3 and 2. I don't know if it's like a positive or a negative quartic function, but I do know that it has to hit -5 and 3. And the only one that hits -5 and 3 is choice 2, sorry. All right, normal curve. I hope this problem is making so much more sense now that we've done normal curves. So this is asking about a chocolate candies, and the mean is 4.3. I love to draw the graph just so I can have a better grasp of what's happening in this problem. And the standard deviation is 0.05. So the probability that back weighs less than 4.27. Well, I want to know where is 4.27 on this graph. Why did I write 4.25? I meant 4.27. So let me fix that now. 4.27. So it's somewhere there, right? And so on your calculator, I know in class we did -999, and that's fine. I did this before you guys told me that your favorite is the 99s. So you could do -1000 as the x min, your x max is 4.27, and your mu is 4.3, and then your standard deviation is 0.05. You could also do it with the z-score if you calculate the z-score as well. But if you do it with the z-score, you only need z-min and z-max. You don't need your min and you don't need your standard deviation, because the z-score is universal in a normal curve. Okay, it's just like your number line. The number line is universal, so same thing. And so that's going to be 0.2743. Half lines. Oh boy, these are like fun problems, but you have to understand what they're asking. So they're telling you that they have these 2 equations and you have to go find what k is. So I would set them equal to each other. So this is what the work I did on by hand. I set them equal and I divide both sides by 100 so that I can get the base isolated. And I realized that everything, like they both have, let me just write this over here. Like they both have D. So I just kind of ignored the D and said, okay, well, 1 to the 1/8 power is equal to K to the E power. Like, do you all see that? And so then after that, well, this is a constant, right? Then all you have to do is go on your calculator and take the ln of both sides. And when you take the ln of both sides, sorry, I realized this could be more color coded so that you could see that like what's happening here. When you take the ln of both sides, ln of E is just 1, and by the power rule, the K comes down from the air. So now it's K is equal to ln of 1/2 to the 1/8 power, or 1/8 times ln of 1/2. And so now you put it in your calculator, K gives you like negative 0.087. And of course, it's endgame. You already know that it has to be choice 1. Now, what do you do if you forget? Well, what you could do is, I mean, they give you 4 choices, right? Why don't you put in the calculator where, you know what, I'll tell you how to put this in the calculator. Y1, I guess I'll do it in blue color, right? So Y1 is 100 e to the negative 0.087x, because your calculator has x's, so we're just going to do that. And then Y2 is going to equal 100 e to the negative 0, wait, to negative, no, it's positive, because the K value here is positive 0.087x. Y3, which is in black, and you can hardly see it. I'm not sure why the emulator does that, but it's e to the negative 11.542x. And then the last one is Y4, which is equal to 100 e to the 11.542x. And then the original, so I'm just going to move this up a little bit. Where am I going to move it? I have no space. This is why the solution takes me forever, because when you do them, you realize issues come up. So I think in future videos, I might just do them with issues and like videotape myself, just because otherwise I just won't get them out. Okay. So then you have this, and then you just look at which column matches with Y5, and the blue one does. So that's the answer. Okay. Translation, when you're looking at translation and they want to do a right 1 unit, remember that I said it's on the inside, it's the opposite of what you think is going to be. So it's going to be -1, and down 1 means -1. So the correct answer is, well, it's log base 2 of x minus 1 equal -1. Now, x-intercept, you're going to set this equal to 0. They love to ask about x-intercepts and y-intercept of logarithmic functions. So be prepared for that. And then the value of x has to be 3 when you solve by hand. Now you can also do it on a calculator. I put it out, I showed you on the calculator, log of x minus 1 divided by log 2, because it's a change of base minus 1. You can use change of base on the calculator. I just wanted to let you know how to do it in case you don't have the change of base formula or you forget on the test. And then of course you have 0, 1, 2, 3 as your x values in your multiple choices, and you see which one had a 0, and choice 4 has a 0 in the y value. Now you do have to know your transformation rules. Okay. So if you're not sure, I would just go on the graph, right? And just like do one part. Remember on Delta Math, like you did one transformation each time. That's what I would do. I would be like, okay, what does the -1 do? Does it move it to the left or move it to the right? Okay. Oh, okay. It moved to the right. Good. I'm on the right track. And then, +1, I want you to play around with it. Okay. In case you get lost. Solving radicals, simplifying radical equations. So for this one, just like really know your rules. Like for example, I would start with square root of 16x squared. That is 4x. X to the 2/3, I'm just going to leave it. 8x to the 5th, well, the cube root of 8 is 2. And 5 divided by 3 means that 3 can go into 5 one time, and there's like a 2 left over. So that's going to simplify into 2x to the first times x to the 2/3 power. When you simplify all that, right? What do I notice? I notice that they both have an x to the 2/3. So I factor that out, and then I add the 4x and the 2x, which gave me 6x. So that's really what I did. I'm doing GCF factoring here. Let me highlight that. So like you know what? I'm gonna highlight that in yellow because I think the yellow background might be better. Like they both have an x to the 2/3. So in the end, I'm going to just add, you can't see that color, right? I'm just going to add 4x and the 2x to give me 6x. And then you combine your bases, because x to the first times x to the 2/3. If you're multiplying exponential expression with the same base, you add the exponent, which is 5/3. And then 5/3 as a fractional exponent means it's the cube root of x to the 5th. So it's 6 times the cube root of x to the 5th, which is choice 2. When in doubt, you could always use your calculator. So here it is. It's longer, but it'll get you to the right answer. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to, oh my goodness, directress. There's a lot. There's 2 ways to do it. I'm going to show you by hand, and then of course with the calculator. So with this, the directress, because it's a parabola with the focus. So let me just read the question, -2,5. Okay, so it says y equals. When the directress is y equals, that's a horizontal line. You know it's going to be a concave up or a concave down, like a happy face or a sad face. So it has to have a degree of 2 with the x. 1 and 2 are degree with the y. So that's concave left and right. That's not going to be. So 1 and 2 are out. And that's why I drew a rough sketch of it on the side. And when I look at my focus, the focus is below the directress. That means it's concave down. That means that your coefficient in front of the y has to be negative. So it's choice 4. Like from there, I already knew it was choice 4, but like, let's dive a little deeper, right? Okay, so the whole story is, here is your directress and here's your focus. The distance from the directress to your focus is 4. So half of 4 is 2. So you're going 2 down. Well, if you're going 2 down, 9 minus 2 is 7. That means your vertex is -2, 7. So that means by the formula, x minus h all squared equals 4p times y minus k. X minus 2 all squared equals 4 times -2 y minus 7. Now, how do you know that p is negative? If it's down, it's negative. If it's left, it's negative as well. Okay, and then that simplifies to x plus 2 all squared equals -8y minus 7. Okay, how do you do this on the calculator? It only works on the newer version, unfortunately, but and what's great is that it kind of gives you the formula already. So you don't really have to memorize it. You can just look it up on your calculator. You go to 4 conics, then you go to parabola, and then you're going to choose whether 1 or 2. And they kind of show you like a little glimpse of like what each one is. Like the first one is concave left and right, and the bottom one is concave up and down. So it's choice 2. And then after you put choice 2, you plug in the information like h is -2, k is 7, and the p-value is -2, and they're going to tell you like the rest is history. But that's, I guess, a good question that might surface is how do you know that your h is -2, 7, and your p is -2? And that's why that drawing that I did earlier in the beginning helps. Okay. Okay. 22. So in 22, there is no way to do this on the calculator easiest. You have to simplify it. But the good news is that everything sort of uses the simplification. What do I mean by that? When you simplify a plus b plus c all squared. So I did a little area model because in order to keep track of all these variables, I need to see it. And so I realized that equals to a squared plus b squared plus c squared plus 2ab plus 2ac plus 2bc, right? So, okay, so I put that on the side, and then y and z, there's no way you can simplify that. Okay, fine. So the first one says you subtract y and z. Well, if I subtract them, like obviously because they have twos, right? One and two has to be out because there's no way you're going to get like 2ab plus 2bc plus 2ac unless you double the z value. But we're adding here, so it has to be plus 2z, and that's the answer. So that's what I mean. Like, you just have to do it once and then figure it out. Now, how do you do this on the calculator? You can do it on the calculator. You just have to use the store function. So I guess I'll show you what I did here since I'm doing a video. So in the store function, you're going to go here. You're going to say, okay, well, let's say 2 was, 3, right? So store, I'm going to type in 2 plus 3 plus 5. And I would encourage you to use prime numbers. And I'm going to say store that into X, okay? Notice I'm not even going to calculate it. I'm going to have the calculator do me a favor and calculate it. So that's actually 100, which I noted here on my legends. This is like my little legends here. And then the y value, so I'm going to store this. I'm going to say, okay, well, that's 2 squared plus 3 squared plus 5 squared. I'm going to store that into y. Y is in green color on 1, so I'm going to go to alpha 1. And that's 38. Fine. Okay. I'm also going to do, I don't think I need parentheses. 2 times 3 plus 3 times 5 plus 5 times 2, right? It's like, oh, I forgot to store it. Okay, that's okay. I can highlight, store, and then I'm going to store it in the value of z. So that's alpha. Z is on 2. Okay, so now that equals to 31. Okay, perfect. And then I'm just going to do my business, like which one is true, right? I'm going to say, well, X I know has to be 100. So if I do second y minus alpha z, I meant alpha, sorry, that's going to be 7, which is not 100 doesn't equal 7. And then since I already typed it, I'm just going to add it, and that equals 69. That's not going to work either. They want me to subtract, but double it. Okay, no problem. That's going to be 24, which is not the answer. And if I add it, you get 100. So choice 4 is the answer. So that's how you do it on the calculator. Okay, 23. Oh my gosh, this video is like taking half an hour. This is like pretty much the whole class time. And I haven't even hit 24 yet. Okay, on average, college seniors graduating in 2012 compute their student loan. Okay, they want to know which is equivalent. All right, you put that into Y5, and then you put all of them into Y1, 2, 3, and 4, and see which one matches, and choice 4 matches. But let's get to the algebra aspect. They wanted to see, did you understand that these two numbers of 365 can cancel out? So it's actually identical. So yeah. And the last one, I know this was super confusing, but then the formula was so easy, but you just had to understand what they were asking. It was kind of stupid problem. A container weighs X ounces, right? So they have two buckets. You got a bucket that weighs X ounces, and you have a bucket that weighs pounds. And then you just have to go to your reference sheet and say, okay, how many pounds are in an ounce? How many ounces are in a pound? It's 16 ounces equal 1 pound. Well, if there's Y pounds, and there's 16 Y ounces. So now that they're in the same units, we do 124 divided by X plus 16Y, and that's your answer. That's pretty much that. Okay, now we go into the short response questions. So I copy and paste this in my exams so that you wouldn't have to read it, because I want you to save 30 seconds so that you can solve other things. Like, this is not important now that you know what it says. 2 things: you need to make sure you're writing in pen. Everything has to be in pen at this point, except for graphs and drawings. And when we say drawings, we mean like constructions really, but you're not going to do it here. So you don't really have to do that here. Most of the time you're going to be graphing. So whenever you're graphing, switch to a pencil. You need to know when to switch your utensils. Okay. So practice that at home. All right. So without further ado, let's take a look at this. So 25, remember I told you they love to ask about conditional probability. Here we have it. So the probability of freshmen given reality. So remember that the formula is, number of freshmen and reality, because they have to satisfy both condition, which is 103, and then over the reality, because given that the student prefer reality, like given that they're only analyzing the students in the reality show. So that's 213. And it's not reducible. So you submit your answer like that. The next question, also an easy breezy thing. Now we switch to pencil, but your table should be in pen. And please provide that graph. So I show you how to do it. Over here, you put in y1 equals, make sure your independent is asked so that way you can control the values, which I don't think is necessary because all of this is integral length. So you could probably scroll up and down. You don't really need to change it to ask. Other thing is that this is a domain between -1 and 4. So it has to be endpoints. There should not be arrows. And you can check this by changing your window on your calculator, where your x min is -1, your x max is 4, and your y min is -10, and your y max is 10. And then you press graph. And if your graph matches the one that's on your calculator, you did a good job. Okay. All right. The next one. The next one really is the quadratic formula or completing the square. So I'm going to show you both techniques. But the way we had done quadratic formula in class is I've always told you to find the discriminant first, which is b squared minus 4ac. So that happens to be -39. And then you're going to substitute it because it makes your calculation a little easier and it gives you, the same thing. Just note that you have to separate the radical negative 39 into radical -1 and radical 39. And that's going to be I radical 39. Then you have to break them apart into A plus and minus BI for full credit. If you leave them together, they will deduct a point. And it sucks because this is worth 2 points. So you've lost half your point, not because you didn't know, but because you forgot to separate it and do what they wanted you to do. Okay. Now in class, I showed you that you can use the quadratic formula that's provided on the reference sheet, right? Like if you forget, then you can do this. I find that a lot of students get tripped up because there's so much plugging in. So again, keep it simple. Now you can also use completing the square method if you want. So the completing the square, you're going to isolate the constant by subtracting 8 on both sides. You get 2x squared plus 5x. Now you're going to factor the 2. So they just keep in mind that that middle term is going to be is positive 5 over 2x. Then your b value, your b over 2 all squared is 5 over 2 divided by 2 all squared. That's actually 5 over 4 all squared equals 25 over 16. So you're adding 25 over 16, right, to both sides. Except when you do 2 times this amount, it's 25 over 8. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to add 25 over 8 to both sides. Because in reality, when you put in 25 over 16 in the parentheses, you're actually just adding 25 over 8. And then with that said, that trinomial becomes 2 times x plus 5 over 4 all squared equals -39 over 8. Divide both sides by 2, and you're going to get that x plus 5 over 4 all squared is equal to -39 over 16. Then you're going to take the square root of both sides. So now it's starting to look like the ones we got as a solution when we solve for the quadratic formula. And then you're going to subtract 5 over 4. And voila, you're done. If you don't understand this, then don't worry about it. Don't stress yourself. Like if you got it through the quadratic formula, then do it this way. Okay. Like it's okay. It's okay if you're more stronger. I mean, I don't think they're going to say like, oh, you must solve it using completing the square. But it's good to know both because more power to you. All right, so there's this question, and I wanted you to, I want to show like three solutions versus one. So the one that we went over in class was the green one, but I also want to do a super shout out to the other students who were pointing out the fact about, you know, people who have time will call. And of course, there's another one that's like, okay, but what if you were driving, you know, behind the truck the whole time? Then, you know, then this is bias. So method one, they're performing a survey and a possible bias that is that only those with time to call will call. Thus, this will make the employee of the month based on someone who drives by the most people with a lot of free time. Okay. Method two, a possible bias could be that there may be one car driving behind one truck for a long time. Thus, this car may not get as many calls as another truck. Okay. All right, that was for 2 points. And make sure, you know, most likely they want one or two sentences, especially when you have to explain, right? You know, keep it to 1 or 2 sentences. You do not need to write a paragraph. You do not need to write an essay. We do not want to read that essay, please. All right, now this one. Okay, I showed in class the long division. Okay, so both classes saw the long division. So if you need to revisit how to do this, here it is. I wrote it out again, so that way you can revisit this. But the second one, synthetic. So now Tasia mentioned that you could do synthetic, so I tried it. But what's really interesting is that you get 6, 15, and 6. So be careful because the answer is really 5, 2, 5, 2. And the reason why you're getting a different answer is because of that division by 3. Okay. So you actually have to go ahead and divide those numbers by 3, except for the remainder. And this is why I didn't want to show the synthetic division, because most kids will forget to divide by 3. And it's like, why are we dividing by 3? And how come we're just dividing the coefficients and not the remainder? And there's just a lot of questions that surface from this that, you know what, why don't you just do it with the long division? You know, because this is maybe easier to digest than trying to relearn this and then messing it up. So so that's the one comment I wanted to say about synthetic division when your number is a fraction, the little corner. Okay, recursive. 2 things I want to note. Please make sure to show all your work. Don't just write 7, 15, 7, 15, 30. And also remember to include the A1. So 3, 7, 15, 31. Do know, and I put this little picture in here, that your calculator is a recursive function on its own. If you times it by 2 and add by 1, just like I showed here, like 3 times 2 plus 1, and then you do it again, times 2 plus 1. And then when you press enter each time, it's going to program itself to do the rule. You can see that in my function, like I only press enter like 3 times and it gave it to me. Okay. And then of course, can this sequence be explicit, a geometric formula? So the key word that we're looking in your work here is common ratio. Like, did you understand that a common ratio is when A2 divided by A1 is equal to A3 divided by A2 is equal to A4 divided by A3? But, you know, you only have to show 2 cases, and then they don't equal, then it's not a geometric sequence. So then you write it. No, this sequence cannot be represented by using an explicit geometric formula because it does not have a common ratio. And then just state the facts. Okay, this is also another 2-pointer. And in class, I just did a straightforward substitution. It's really just, if I were you and you're one of those students that is like, I get tripped up over the little things like substitution, then write it out. Write out a little legend and write M equals 137,250, R equals 0.036, and N equals 360 months, and then substitute it into the formula, which I forgot to highlight. I did this in class, but I totally forgot now. And that's okay. I'll do it now. You know, you replace P with 137,250, the R value. There are like 3 places to do this. So this is just like, if you're not careful with your substitution, you can mess this up. And you should get 624. And when you substitute it into your calculator, it looks like this. Just be careful because it says round to the nearest dollar. So it should be 624. The next one is an angle. So, okay, several things. All students take calculus, keep track of the trig function sign. So this is in quadrant. Let me write this in purple. This is in quadrant 4, and that means that cosine is positive, right? Cosine of theta is positive, as well as reciprocal function secant of theta. But because we're looking for a sine, we know that this has to equal a negative value, okay? Sine is opposite over adjacent. So you're going to draw an angle with respect to the x-axis, and that's your reference angle. And it's going to be opposite, which is -1. And the hypotenuse is radical 5. And the hypotenuse is because of Pythagorean theorem, which I know you all know how to do because you passed geometry. So you don't have to show that. And it's negative radical 5 over 5. Well, it's -1 over radical 5, but remember to rationalize this by multiplying top and bottom by radical 5. I think you can get away with not rationalizing. I just don't know, because some rules, they do penalize you and sometimes they don't. I forget which years it is. So when in doubt, just do it out. And also, I know why some kids don't do it, because they might make a mistake. And of course, if this is a 2-pointer, you don't want to mess that up and lose a point, So then what I would do if I were you, and I mentioned this in class, I would just go on the calculator, -1 divided by the square root of 5, and just make sure that this is the same thing, like the decimal values are equivalent. So if they are, then we know we've done this right. All right, I'm going to snippet this picture in there and update it into our solution. Save to photos. Add over here. I took a lot of photos today. What are we adding? We're adding, this fraction. Okay. So I'm going to write check. Check to see. Check to see if the fractions are equivalent. And that's what you call them, right? Fractions. Okay. All right. I just want to move this answer here and copy and paste this, because I want to get rid of this. So that, because this could be a possible answer. Now, where do I move this? Maybe I move this here. No, hold on. I know what's happening. It's confused. Okay, move this here. Move this here. And I'm going to move this here, because I can hear some students asking me okay, how did you get that? Well, this is how I got it. Okay. But do try to figure out the whys, because if you can figure it out and not ask so many questions, right, then I know you know how to understand it. And it's good to answer your own questions, because then you really learn to be independent. It's not every question can be asked in class, right? In reality, you won't have time to ask questions in class, actually. Okay. Question now. This is now the 4-pointers. It's the same directions. It's just now it's 4-pointers, and it's really most of the time it's just a 2-pointer, just more 2-pointer questions. You'll see what I mean. So for question, and there's only four questions like this. For question 33, I wrote out the steps in case you forgot, but you're really just trying to isolate that radical here. You know what? I'm just gonna get rid of this calculator so you can see it in the big screen. So you're distributing the 2, then you're subtracting the x on both sides, and you get x plus 21. Now that you've isolated the radical, you're going to square both sides. Then you're going to set the equation equal to 0, because it's a quadratic. And with quadratics, we can factor or use quadratic formula. But factoring is the easiest. So I'm going to factor by finding two numbers. When you multiply, it gives you 435. But when you add it, 44. And that gives us 15 and 29. And so you're going to get negative 15 and negative 29. But when you check using your calculator, you're going to see that negative 15 is the only one that works. And so x equals negative 29 has to be rejected. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking to see, can you reject an answer? Other things I want to note is that if you forget how to factor your trinomials, like 435, it's not that we forgot. It's like, honestly, 435 is a big number. I know when I used to take this test and I'm like, gosh, I have to go through all these factors again. So I wish I'd known this as a kid, but I didn't. So I'm telling you now, it's 435 divided by x, and then y2 is 435 divided by x plus x. And you're looking for y2, you're looking for 44 and y2, and we found it to be 15 and 29. So that will save you some time. Okay. Oh my gosh, statistics. So you know statistics are going to be 4-pointers, but they're doable because they break it down. So they say, okay, for 1 point, what's the difference of the means? Okay, well, and they tell you they want the scented x bar of the scented minus x bar of the unscented. Okay, that's 23 minus 18, which is 5. So that's 1 point. The next, they want you to take this and they want to analyze the 90, like the in between 95%. Okay. So I drew one. So you could get full credit if you drew like a normal distribution and you have like 2 standard deviation below and 2 standard deviation above. Because remember in class, I said you put the mean in the middle. So 0.03. Where did that come from? Go back to the answer. Okay. Like, look, the answer is like right in front of you. You just have to go look. Okay. So it's 0.03. So 0.03 here, and then standard deviation, you're going to add 1.548 to get the values on the right side, and then you're going to subtract to get the values on the left side. So I wrote out the values, and at 2 standard deviation, remember, 2 standard deviation is about 95%. So we're going to get those two values, and we got negative 3.07 and 3.13. Okay, and again, round to the nearest 100. 100 has 2 zeros, so 2 decimal places. That's how I remember it. Like, oh, wait, what's 100? Oh, that's 100. That's 1 over 100, right? So that's 2 zeros, 2 decimal places. Now, if you don't want to do all that work, that's fine. You just have to remember the rule is x bar plus or minus 2 standard deviation. Is this a marginal error? You're right. This is very similar to the marginal error calculation. So you get 0.030 plus or minus 3.096. And then, of course, you're going to get negative 3.066 and 3.126. Okay. Okay. Now, the last one, I think this is 1 point on top. And the last one is 2 points because they want to see if you understood the problem. So I'm going to show you a writing that uses both drawings. So one that I drew on in part in the previous part, and then the other simulation. So you can say, yes, the difference in means in Joseph experiment is statistically significant based on the simulation because 5 is greater than 3.13. Thus, it doesn't fall within the middle 95% of the difference in means. This means that it is statistically significant. From the simulation, a difference of 5 or greater occurred 3 times out of 1,000, which is statistically significant. Do you have to write all of this? No. You can just mention the first part if you're going to be using the first diagram. So I guess I will highlight like which one is for which. I don't know where to do that, actually. All right, let's see. Okay. I'll highlight the yellow. Yeah, there we go. That's what I'll do. I don't want to highlight in like big bold colors because then it's too hard to see. But this entire part talks about, this is the evidence that came from your diagram from here. Okay. And then this one came from here. So whichever evidence you want to use, that's fine. You can also say from the simulation, a difference of 5 or greater occur 3 times out of 1,000, which is statistically significant. Okay. So in other words, they're trying to say it's not an impossible probability. Okay. Okay. 35. Oh, we're so close to the end. Like this is 2 more questions. Okay. All right, reread this problem, skim through it, just grab the parts that you need. Principal is 63,000. R is 2.55 over 100. That's 0.0255. N is 12 because it's monthly. Plug it into the formula. If you forget the formula, I wrote it out for you. Just make sure to write the rule that you're using and then the substitution. Okay, don't just write the answer. Okay. And then you're going to use, of course, you know, you're going to build on to the previous. So I think it'll be 1 point for this and then 3 points here, because there's a lot that's involved here. Like, did you understand to set it equal to 100,000? Then did you solve for the t by getting rid of the base, taking the log of both sides? Do we know how to use log? Did you round correctly? So 18.14 years is what they're looking for. Okay. If you're off by a few, that's when it gets a little tricky, because now they have to go back and see if they agree with your calculation. So what am I trying to tell you? Do not round early. Use your calculator and do it all in your calculator. Okay. All right. And again, I would just check just to make sure, because you know, some of you do this entire step right, and then at the end you get like this wonky because you know you forgot to do it correctly on your calculator. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, you know who you are, you won't even use the fraction bars, and that's fine, but you got to know how to use it correctly. So I'm going to show you how to do it correctly. That you use alpha. I do want you to use alpha x and set it as a fraction, and this is 12 log of 1.002125, and that's 18. Like, that's the right way to do it. Some of you will do this, and you know who you are, and that's fine. But if you're going to do it without the alpha x, right? Check this out. Look what happens. Do you see my mistake already? It's going to give you a different answer. You know why, right? Because you forgot to put parentheses around your base. In your original one, it tells you like, oh, just divide by 12 and then multiply the whole thing by log of 1.002125. That's literally what you told the calculator. Okay, so you have to put parentheses. But if I were you, just do alpha x. Just make it really easy for yourself. Now, and that's why checking is so important. So let's see, like if I do 630, like if I do 63,000 times 1 plus alpha x and 0.0255 divided by 12, and I raise it to the 12 times that answer, I do get 1,000. Okay, so I'm just gonna take a snapshot of this and put it in my work so that you remember how to do this. Okay. All right. Let's. Glitchiness. Come on. Now my thing is frozen. Oh, okay. All right. So where is it in my photo? It's right here. I honestly, when I was taking like big tests like this, I always check my work. I took that extra hour and I just started plugging everything back in there. Check your work on calculator. This is taking more than an hour. There's no way I'm going to go over this in details. Okay. The next step, 36, I wish it was 37. 36, average rate of change. And of course, is a trig function, right? Because they know, that the average rate of change is, delta y over delta x, or slope, right? Because you pass algebra 1. And so when you put in the calculator, you should get 2 minus 14 all over 2 minus 1, which is negative 12. 2 ways to do this. But the first one is my favorite because it's easy. It's nice and clean. Y1 equals 12 cosine pi over 3x plus 8. You put in there. Then you go to your calculator. You input 2 and 1 and see what the outputs are, which is 2 and 14. And then you just do 2 minus 14. Okay. You could also just straight up put it in the calculator. But the key thing is here is like, don't forget this minus sign around this. Like, don't forget parentheses, because remember it's subtracting. So you're going to have a -8 in the end. If you forget it, you're going to add 8 and it's going to give you a different answer. Like what happened in class when you did it in your calculator. And then the next one is solve. So I did it algebraically because some of you were like, well, how do I solve for the t value? So you solve by solving cosine, okay? So you subtract 8 on both sides, then you divide by 12, and now you have cosine pi over 3t equals -2 over 3. Take the arc cosine of both sides to figure out what the theta is, and your theta is going to be in radians, and that's fine. It's 2.3, right? So now, keep in mind that cosine is negative in quadrant 2 and in quadrant 3. So you have two answers. An answer in quadrant 2 where it's 2.2. And that, if you look at my calculator, you can just do arc cosine of -2.3. What did I do after that? Oh, I deleted it, but okay, let me just pull up my calculator so you could see what's going on. Okay, and I want you to understand, if you don't understand it, that's fine, because you don't need to do this to understand it, okay? I'll show you the second method, but this one is gonna take the longest to digest, but everything is in pi radians, okay? So your mode has to be in radians, okay? And I'm gonna do arc cosine of -2 divided by 3. So that gives me 2.3. That means that the angle is in the second quadrant. How do I know? Because pi is 180 degrees and pi is 3.14 and 2.3 is less than 3.14. So I know it's in quadrant 2, sorry. After that, I'm going to times it by 3 divided by pi, because they say that pi over 3t is equal to 2.3. So if you divide it, you get 2.19, which is 2.2 seconds. Great. That's an answer that happens in quadrant 2. Well, what about quadrant 3? And how do I get to that answer? Well, you need the reference angle. How do you calculate the reference angle? Well, the reference angle is going to be pi minus angle, right? Because it's in quadrant 2. So then you're going to add to the pi, right? And when you add to the pi, it's 3.98, and that gives you the angle in quadrant 3. And then you're going to times it by 3 divided by pi, because you have to solve for t. So you set pi over 3t equals to 3.98266, and then times it by 3 over pi, and that gives you about 3.8. Okay, perfect. I wonder if I can snapshot this. Does this make sense? It's kind of like the same answer, but I think what's missing is this 2.19, I realized in the original. So I think I'm going to snapshot this new one. Okay, so the other way, as you're watching, is to use the graphing calculator. And you'll get full points, but you just have to write that you're using the graphing calculator. I think my iPad is heating because I'm overusing it. And okay, so this is gonna be, that's the one I want to add, right? No, this is not the one I want to add. Okay, now it's like, where is the picture? I think it's this one. Yeah, this is the one I want to add. And here I'm showing you the calculator technique. Now, what makes this question difficult is that it's all in radians, and we're just not comfortable in radians yet. Okay, no problem. You can also do it by graphing. So remember in class, we had to graph it out, and what are the things that you need to graph this successfully? You need to know that the midline is 8, right? Because the equation is +8. So you graph the horizontal line at 8, and 12 is your amplitude. So 12 units up and 12 units down. So your maximum is going to be 20, and your minimum is going to be -4. And your period is 2 pi over b, and b is, let me highlight it, b is pi over 3. So 2 pi divided by pi over 3 is the same thing as 2 pi times 3 over pi, which equals 6. So that means it makes one complete cycle from 0 to 6. Let's take a look and see that in action. Up here you go. You have max, 0, min, 0, max, and that happens at 6. And then your period, the interval, if you take the period divided by 4, because it's 4 equal parts, it's 5 critical numbers, but between each of them, it's 4 sectors, if you think about it, right? Like if I drew the, let's write it over here. If I write like 0, oh no, this is cosine, right? So I'll make it thicker. Oh, not too thick. Okay, if I write like max, 0, min, 0, max, like you only used 1, 2, 3, 4 dashes, right? So, and you can visually see there's only 4 equal parts. So when you divide by 5, it means that's 1.5. So each part of the critical line is 1.5, which is perfect because your numbers are integral, like they're not in pies or anything. So now every 1.5, I'm going to go 0, max, 0, min, 0, max, max, 0, min, 0, max. Okay. But they only wanted from 0, what is it, from 1 to 5. So you only wanted this piece. So in technicality, I don't need all of this, right? Like if I were to white them all out, I only need this part. I don't even need to look at all of this. This is not part of my diagram. And I also don't need the other part from like 0 to 1, right? But it's there because I think the numbers on the y-axis is important. So I'm just going to leave it there. It doesn't matter because they're looking for the 0, which is going to be 2.2 and 3.8. Okay. And then on the bottom, you can write like, how do you calculate this? So first, make sure it's in radians. Type your equation into y1 and then change your window into the minimum x value is 1 and the max is 5 because they tell you. Your y min is -4 and your y max is 20 because you calculated it by adding and subtracting the amplitude from the midline, right? 12 plus 8 is 20 and 8 minus 12 is -4. And then you're going to go to, and that's what the graph looks like, right? So that way, you know, like if you're on the right track, if you graphed it correctly. And then on your second calc, there is a 0 button. That's what you're going to use, choice number 2, which I'm going to highlight here because, oops. I'm going to highlight choice 2. You're going to highlight 0. And when you highlight the 0, it's going to ask you 3 questions, left bound, right bound, and 0. And when you're doing this, okay, the right bound on the left side of the coordinate, right, your y value has to be positive, and this one has to be negative, okay? They have to switch signs because you're asking like, what's the right bound, left bound, right, above the x-axis, and has above the x-axis has to be positive, and what's below, okay, it has to be negative. And finally, guess, yes, they tell you 2.119, which is 2.2, right? Same thing over here. They're going to ask you left bound. Make sure this time it flops, it switches, so it has to be negative, and then the other one has to be positive, and then they tell you to guess, and there you have it. Okay. I can't do this on my calculator because my emulator doesn't do this. So that's why I took pictures to show you how to do it on your calculator. So do try it because it will get you full credit. You would just have to write, I use a calculator to find the 0, and the x values are x approximately to 2.2 and 3.8, and just draw a rough sketch of it. Okay. It doesn't have to be exact. I did it so that you would understand the whole picture. And the last but not least, of course, is a 6-point question. So there's 3 parts, and it's about logs. So they wanted you to substitute 16 into the function. And so you get 16 minus 4. Now, the common mistake is that students write 16,000, and just remember that it's already in terms of like the numbers of visits is in terms of thousands, like this keyword here, in thousands. Okay, so do read the problem carefully and annotate if you need to. So this is approximately 1.1. I don't think people are questioning this. And then the graph, what I want to see. So this is like the first one might be like 1 point or 2 points. It might be 2 points. And then this one might be 2 points or 3. I can't remember the breakdown, but because it's 1 point for the correct graph of P of X and 1 point for the correct graph of R of X, and then 1 point for like, did you identify the point of intersection, which is 14,1? And you can clearly see that here in both of them. So this is why I definitely want you to include a table of value, okay? Because it's going to be helpful. Like the more you have, the more you're going to set yourself up for success. Like P of X, you write out a table. I usually tell my kids to write the integral values, but for this one, it was hard to plot it. Like when I tried to do it on my own, it was really hard to plot the curve with just 2 points. So I would get all the even numbers, because if you look at the x-axis, it goes up by 2, and then do your best to plot them in your graph, okay? And the second one is also, it was confusing to do this because the intervals are different. So just be careful, but make sure to have your table. So like if we see that your tables were correct, but you plotted it wrong because you misread the interval, at least you can get some points back. And then finally, the last question is interpreting that point of intersection, which is the 14,000. And it means that the two models will provide the same rating at 14,000 sites visits per week. So, okay, that is a wrap. This took more than an hour to show you the solution to the entire Regents. But I think it took less than 3 hours. All right. I will see you next time. Happy studying. Bye.